Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Have you ever worked so hard just to stay afloat and still felt broke at the end of the month? You wake up early. You work all day. You come home tired. And somehow, the money is still not enough. Today that ends. This lesson is for English learners who want more than words. It's for your mind, your future, and your money. By the end of this video, you will understand the one mental shift that separates people who struggle with money from people who attract it. This is not about working harder. It is about thinking differently. Here is something most people never hear. Wealth starts in the mind before it ever reaches your hands. Not after you get the raise, not after you win the lottery. Before any of that, in the mind first. Most people spend their whole life chasing money. They work 2 jobs. They check their bank account with fear. They stay up at night doing the math again and again, hoping the numbers will somehow look different this time. And nothing changes. Why? Because they are solving the wrong problem. The real problem is not in your bank account. The real problem is in your mind. And today, we are going to fix that one lesson at a time. 8 lessons in total. Each one a small key that opens a different lock. Think about the people you know who seem to have money figured out. Chances are, it was never really about luck. It was never really about a magic opportunity that fell into their lap while everyone else missed it. Somewhere along the way, before the income changed, something else changed first. A belief, a habit of thought, a quiet decision about who they were going to be. If you are serious about changing how you think and not just how you work, subscribe right now. Because what you are about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about money. Let's begin. Lesson 1. The survival mindset trap. Picture 2 people standing at the start of the same year. Same income, same bills, same 24 hours in a day. 1 year later, one of them is still stuck. The other has changed everything. The difference was never the money they started with. Here's the truth. Most people are not actually trying to build wealth. They are trying to survive. And survival and building are 2 completely different games played with 2 completely different minds. A survival mind wakes up and asks, "Will I have enough this month?" A builder mind wakes up and asks, "What can I create this month?" A survival mind sees a paycheck and thinks, "How do I make this last?" A builder mind sees the same paycheck and thinks, "How do I make this grow?" It has nothing to do with being rich or poor in your bank account right now. It has everything to do with which question runs through your head first thing in the morning. A survival mindset will always play defense with money. It hides cash under a mattress of fear. It avoids risk, even smart risk. It says no before it even hears the offer. You know this feeling. You have felt it. The fear that shows up the moment an opportunity appears. The voice that says, "What if I lose it? What if it does not work? What if I end up worse than before?" That voice is not protecting you. It is keeping you exactly where you are. Psychologist Carol Dweck spent years studying why some people grow and others stay stuck. She found that people with a growth mindset, people who believe their abilities can expand, take more risks, recover faster from failure, and end up further ahead. The same is true with money. If you believe your financial situation is fixed, it will stay fixed. If you believe it can grow, your mind starts looking for the way. Notice what happens the next time a small financial opportunity shows up in your life. A side project, a new client, a chance to learn something that pays later instead of now. Watch your first reaction before you think about it. Does your chest tighten? Does your mind immediately search for reasons that it will fail? Or does some quiet part of you lean forward instead? That first half second tells you more about your current mindset than any number in your bank account. A mind built to survive will always play defense with money. It protects what little it has instead of growing what it could have. And the tragedy is most people never even notice they are doing it. They call it being careful. They call it being responsible. But underneath it is fear wearing a disguise. So ask yourself honestly, when you think about money, are you trying to protect what you have, or are you trying to build something new? The answer to that question says more about your future than your current bank balance ever could. Here is the part that surprises most people. A survival mindset is not a character flaw. It is often a perfectly reasonable response to a genuinely hard chapter of life. If you grew up without much, or went through a season where money truly was scarce, your mind learned to protect itself. The same way a hand pulls away from a hot stove without needing to think about it first. That response kept you safe once. The problem is, it does not know the danger has passed. It keeps reacting to a threat that for many people reading this right now is no longer actually there. This is why willpower alone rarely fixes this. You cannot simply decide one morning to stop being afraid of money, the same way you cannot simply decide to stop flinching at a loud noise. What you can do is start noticing the reaction without obeying it automatically. Notice the tightness. Notice the old voice. And then slowly make one small decision that a builder would make instead of the decision fear is asking you to make. Not a huge leap. One decision, then another a week later, then another. Lesson 2. The scarcity loop. Maria grew up in a small apartment where money was never talked about calmly. It was talked about in whispers late at night after she was supposed to be asleep. She remembers the sound of her parents arguing over bills at the kitchen table. She remembers her mother's hands shaking when she opened envelopes from the bank. By the time Maria was an adult, she had a good job. She earned enough, but she still flinched every time she checked her account. She still felt that old fear in her chest, even when there was nothing to fear. She had inherited a pattern, not just from her parents' wallet, but from her parents' mind. Now think about this. Fear of money does not need a reason to exist. It can live in you long after the danger is gone. It can sit quietly in the background of your life, shaping every decision, every hesitation, every missed opportunity. Without you ever noticing, it is there. This is what we call the scarcity loop. It works like this. You believe there is not enough. That belief makes you afraid. Fear makes you grip tighter. Gripping tighter blocks new opportunities from reaching you. And fewer opportunities confirm the original belief that there was never enough to begin with. The loop feeds itself quietly year after year until it feels less like a belief and more like simple fact. Scarcity makes you grip. Abundance makes you build. One closes your hand into a fist. The other opens it to receive. Maria did not break this pattern by getting a bigger paycheck. She broke it the day she sat down and asked herself a simple but terrifying question. Is this fear actually mine, or did I just inherit it? That single question cracked something open. She began separating her parents' story from her own. She began making financial decisions based on her actual situation today, not the fear she carried from a kitchen table 20 years ago. It did not happen overnight. There were months where the old fear crept back in, where she caught herself flinching again at a number that should not have scared her. But each time the question got a little easier to ask, and the old loop got a little easier to interrupt. This is the part people miss. You cannot out-earn a scarcity mindset. You can make more money and still feel poor, because the problem was never the number in your account. It was the story running underneath it. Until you interrupt that story, more income just means more fear with more zeros attached. If any of this sounds familiar, you are not broken. You were simply trained early by people who were scared themselves. But a pattern you did not choose is still a pattern you can change. Lesson 3. Identity before income. Howard Schultz grew up in a housing project in Brooklyn. His father worked physical jobs, the kind with no safety net. One day, his father got injured on the job and was let go with no insurance, no compensation, nothing. Howard watched his family struggle through that winter, and something in him decided this would not be his story forever. Years later, when Schultz built Starbucks into a global company, he did something most business owners at the time considered strange. He gave health insurance to part-time workers. He gave stock options to baristas. People asked him why he would spend that kind of money on entry-level employees. His answer was simple. He was not just building a coffee company. He was building the company he wished his father had worked for. Here's what most people miss. Schultz did not become wealthy by chasing wealth. He became wealthy by building from a clear identity, a clear sense of who he was and what he stood for. The money was a result. It was never the starting point. This is the third shift you need to understand. You don't attract what you want. You attract who you are. If you see yourself as someone who is always behind, always struggling, always one step from disaster, your decisions will quietly confirm that identity day after day. But if you see yourself as someone who builds, who creates value, who takes care of people around them, your decisions start moving in that direction, instead often before you even notice the shift. Try this for a moment. Imagine the version of you who already thinks clearly about money. Not someday. Not after the next raise. Right now in your mind. Walk that version of you into a hard conversation about price. Let that version of you respond calmly when an unexpected bill arrives. Watch that version of you treat a small win with excitement instead of suspicion that it will not last. Identity is quiet. It does not announce itself. It shows up in the small choices nobody else sees. The choice to invest one more hour. The choice to ask for what you are worth. The choice to believe a setback is temporary instead of permanent. Every one of those small choices is a vote for the identity you are building, whether you notice it or not. The gap between who you are now and who you could become is not closed by money. It is closed by identity. Build the identity first. The income has a way of catching up. Lesson 4. The value creation shift. There was a man who worked 2 jobs for 10 years. He left his house before sunrise and came home after his kids were already asleep. He told himself this was the price of providing for his family, and in many ways, it was true. But after 10 years, he sat down one night and looked at his finances honestly. Despite all those hours, he was barely further ahead than when he started. He realized something that changed everything. He was not building anything. He was trading hours for dollars, and trading hours for dollars has a ceiling. Because there are only so many hours in a day. No matter how hard he pushed, he could never sell more than 24 hours, and most of those were already spoken for. Stay with me, because this is where the shift happens. He started spending 1 hour each night after his kids were asleep, learning a skill people would pay for directly. Not another job, a skill. Something he could offer, something that created value beyond his own time. It took him 8 months before he made his first dollar from it. It took 2 years before that skill replaced one of his jobs completely. Money follows value, not hours. That is the whole secret, and almost nobody acts on it because it asks for patience most people are not willing to give. Here is the divide most people never see. 99% of people exchange time for money and stop there. They take the job, they collect the check, they call it a life. The 1% who break through do something different. They exchange time for skill and skill for value and value for money. It takes longer in the beginning. It pays for the rest of your life. Notice that nobody told this man to do this. There was no announcement, no perfect moment, no sign from the universe. There was only a tired man with a notebook, an hour of darkness after his children fell asleep, and a decision to use that hour differently than the night before. If this is starting to make sense for you, hit like right now, because more people need to hear this exact lesson today. Let's keep building. You do not need a new job tomorrow. You need 1 hour tonight spent building something that did not exist this morning. That hour repeated is how ceilings disappear. This does not mean quitting your current job out of nowhere or risking your family's stability on a guess. The man with 2 jobs kept both of them while he learned his new skill in the dark hours nobody else wanted. He let the new value he was creating prove itself slowly, quietly, before he ever leaned his whole life on it. That patience is not weakness. It is exactly what separates people who build something lasting from people who burn out chasing a shortcut that never existed in the first place. Lesson 5. The discomfort tax. Take a breath because this next lesson is one most people would rather avoid. Every real change in your financial life comes with a bill attached, and that bill is discomfort. You pay it before the reward arrives, never after. Sarah Blakely understood this better than most. Before she built Spanx into a billion-dollar company, she spent years selling fax machines door to door, hearing the word no more times than she could count. Most people would have called that failure. Her father saw it differently. Every dinner, he would ask her one question: "What did you fail at today?" If she had nothing to report, he looked almost disappointed. If she had failed at something, he celebrated it. That single habit rewired how she saw risk. Failure stopped being something to fear and became something to collect, almost like evidence that she was actually trying. By the time she pitched her idea for footless pantyhose to manufacturer after manufacturer, rejection did not stop her because rejection had already lost its power over her years earlier. Quitters wait for the perfect moment to begin. Builders start with what they have, knowing the moment will never feel perfect. The discomfort of starting too early will always feel smaller eventually than the regret of starting too late. Growth always sends the bill before the reward. The uncomfortable conversation about raising your prices comes before the higher income. The awkward first weeks of a new skill come before it becomes profitable. The fear of asking for what you are worth comes before anyone agrees to pay it. There is no version of growth that skips this step. Most people quit exactly at the point where the bill is due, right before the reward was about to arrive. They mistake the discomfort for a sign they are on the wrong path, when really it is usually a sign they are close. Think about the last time you avoided something uncomfortable that you knew deep down you needed to do. Maybe it was a hard conversation. Perhaps it was an application you kept putting off. Or it might have simply been admitting a number on a page that scared you. That avoidance felt like relief in the moment. It rarely felt like relief a year later. There is a strange kind of math hiding inside discomfort. The cost of doing the hard thing is usually paid once up front all at once, and it feels enormous in that moment. The cost of avoiding the hard thing is paid slowly in small pieces spread out over years so quietly that most people never add it up. By the time they finally do the math, the second bill is usually far larger than the first one ever would have been. The next time something feels hard, scary, or uncomfortable on your way toward a goal, do not take that as a stop sign. Take it as a receipt. You are paying the tax. The reward is still coming. Lesson 6. The compound mind effect. It goes deeper than most people realize. Your financial future is not decided by one big decision. It is decided by thousands of small ones, repeated so often, you stop noticing them at all. Author Darren Hardy calls this the compound effect. Small, smart choices made consistently over time create results so large they eventually look impossible from the outside. The opposite is also true. Small, careless choices repeated long enough create a kind of slow collapse that nobody saw coming because no single decision looked dangerous on its own. This works the same way inside your mind. Neuroscience tells us the brain physically reshapes itself based on repeated thought, a process called neuroplasticity. Think a scarcity thought once, and nothing much happens. Think it every single day for 5 years, and it becomes the lens through which you see every dollar, every opportunity, every risk. This is why one motivational video will never change your life, and this lesson alone will not either. What changes your life is the thought you choose to repeat on an ordinary Tuesday, when nobody is watching, when there is no camera, when there is no audience to perform for. Small thoughts repeated daily become your net worth. Not because thoughts magically attract cash falling from the sky, but because repeated thoughts become beliefs. Beliefs become decisions, and decisions repeated over months and years become your entire financial life. So here is something practical. Each morning before you check your phone, before the noise of the day enters your mind, ask yourself one question. What is one small action today that my future self will thank me for? You do not need the perfect answer. You need the repetition of asking. Most people overestimate what they can change in one dramatic day and underestimate what they can build in one ordinary year of small, honest answers to that single question. The mind, like a muscle, grows from repetition, not from intensity alone. A year of small, honest answers to that question will outperform a single brilliant idea you never acted on. This is not exciting. It will not feel dramatic on any single day, but compound effects rarely do until the day they suddenly are. Lesson 7. The environment filter. When Oprah Winfrey was young, she lived for a time with her grandmother in rural Mississippi, in a house with no running water. Nobody around her was talking about building empires. Nobody around her was discussing investing or ownership or building something that would outlast a single paycheck. The conversations she heard were about getting by, not about getting ahead. Hear me on this. The environment you spend your time in does not just influence your mood. It sets the ceiling on what you believe is possible, often without you ever realizing the ceiling is there at all. If the people around you constantly talk about how unfair the system is, how nobody gets ahead anymore, how trying is pointless, your mind absorbs that as fact. Even if you never agreed to believe it out loud, if the people around you talk about ideas, opportunities, and ownership, your mind absorbs that instead. You become an average of the conversations you are most exposed to. This has nothing to do with abandoning people you love. It is about being honest about what certain rooms are doing to your thinking. A rich mindset surrounds itself with people who ask, "How can this work?" A poor mindset, regardless of actual income, surrounds itself with people who say, "That will never work. Who do they think they are?" Environments do not need permission to shape you. They work quietly in the background through 1,000 small comments and shrugs and sighs, until one day you realize your own dreams have started sounding smaller just to match the room you're standing in. Your environment sets your ceiling until you change it. Oprah did not escape Mississippi by staying in the same rooms, hearing the same limits, accepting the same ceiling as permanent. She sought out new rooms, new conversations, new possibilities, and slowly her sense of what was possible expanded to match them. Moving across the country is not required to change your environment. You can start by changing what you read, what you listen to, and which conversations you choose to stay in versus politely leave. 10 minutes a day in a room that expects more from you can undo years of rooms that expected nothing. Look honestly at your closest circle. Are they expanding your ceiling or quietly confirming your limits? The answer matters more than almost anything else on this list. You will not always be able to choose your family, and that is not what this lesson is asking of you. But you can choose what you let shape your daily thinking. A podcast on the drive to work instead of complaining talk radio. 5 minutes reading about someone who built something instead of 5 minutes scrolling through reasons it cannot be done. None of these choices feel dramatic in the moment. Each one alone looks almost too small to matter. Stacked over a year, they quietly rebuild the entire ceiling above your head. Lesson 8. The Ownership Shift. There was a young man who spent years blaming his town for his bad luck. No real opportunities here, he would say. Everyone who makes it leaves this place. I was just born in the wrong town at the wrong time to the wrong family. And for a long time, that story felt completely true to him, because he had repeated it so many times it had hardened into fact. Then one day a mentor he respected said something that cut through all of it. He said the town did not write your story. You did every time you chose to believe nothing could change here. That sentence landed like a physical blow. Not because it was cruel, but because some quiet part of him had always suspected it was true. Let me make this simple. As long as the problem belongs to your circumstances, you never have to do anything because circumstances are not yours to fix. But the moment you take ownership, even partial ownership of your situation, you also take back the power to change it. That trade feels uncomfortable. It is also the only trade that actually works. J.K. Rowling understood this kind of ownership long before the world knew her name. She was a single mother living on welfare writing pages of a manuscript in cafes because her apartment was too cold to sit in for long. 12 publishers rejected her story. She could have blamed the publishing industry. She could have blamed her circumstances. And honestly, many of them were genuinely difficult, not imagined. But she kept submitting that manuscript anyway, because somewhere inside her, she had already decided this was her responsibility, to carry not the world's responsibility to fix for her. There is a strange kind of relief in ownership, even though it sounds like a heavier weight to carry. Blame keeps you waiting for someone else to fix things. Ownership hands the pen back to you, and the pen, once it is back in your hand, never has to be given away again. Wealth starts in the mind before it ever reaches your hands. You have heard that idea several times now in this lesson, and here at the highest point, it matters most of all, because ownership is where that mental shift becomes real. Not when you say it, when you act like it is already true. The moment you stop blaming, you start building, not someday when conditions improve. Now, with whatever you currently have, in whatever situation you are currently in, the town did not write your story. The childhood did not write your story. The bad luck did not write your story. You did, and you still are with every choice you make starting today. You were never broke. You were just thinking like someone who had to survive, not someone built to thrive. That is the whole shift, packed into one sentence worth carrying with you. Survival protects what little it has. Building creates what does not exist yet. Scarcity grips while abundance opens its hands. Identity leads income, not the other way around. Value gets paid, hours alone do not. Discomfort always arrives before the reward. Small thoughts repeated daily, quietly, become your net worth. Your environment sets the ceiling until you choose to change the room, and ownership is where all of it finally becomes real. You did not need a different past to start today. You did not need a different family, a different town, or a different beginning. You only need a different question running through your mind tomorrow morning, and the morning after that, and the one after that. This has been a lesson for English learners and for anyone ready to think differently about money. Which one of these 8 lessons do you need to hear again today? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. If this lesson moved something else, you share it with someone who is still stuck thinking the old way. Subscribe for more lessons like this one. See you in the next video.